Well, with the trim done on the mobile sanding center, I went back to my drawer front stock that I glued up and started to fit them into each spot. Now, the way I went about doing that was I first trimmed the width to the rough dimension, just a little oversized, and I did it so that I got the pattern of the grain the way I wanted it on each drawer. After I got them to the kind of rough size in this dimension, I then cut them to the exact length that I wanted to fit inside the cabinet. I then went back and trimmed ever so slightly, and I used a combination. If it was a little bit that I needed to take off, I went ahead and ran it through the table saw. If it was just a tiny bit to take off, I just did it with a hand plane real quick and fitted each one in. I started with the bottom one. I put a couple of spacers down here, a couple of spacers on the side. Then I went to the second one. I put a couple of spacers there, a couple of spacers on the side. I put a little tape to keep it from falling out. And then I finished up with the top one, a couple of more spacers and a little tape up here to hold it in place. Now that I've got these fitted in, I'm ready to go to the next step before attaching the drawer fronts. But just a couple of quick notes. Normally, I like to use nickels or pennies or dimes for spacers. They're consistent, they work out really well. But it's summer, and unusually, the humidity here has been quite high. For the last couple of weeks, it's just been unbearable. So I know that as fall and winter approach, the air's going to dry out and these drawer fronts are going to shrink a little bit. So I'm fitting them in a little tighter than I normally would. In the winter, I would put a little bit more space knowing that they would expand some in the summer. But in the summer, with the wood fully expanded, I know they're going to shrink a little bit. So I'm fitting them in pretty tight. So what I'm using is some scraps of the laminate or formica material that I usually put on the tops of my cabinets. And I just cut up some scraps and I'm using those. It's really thin. The next step in attaching these drawer fronts is to take these out, mark and drill the holes for the pulls. Once that's done, I'll put them back into place with the shims held into place just like they are now, and I'll use those holes and I'll drill through the drawer box using those two holes for the pulls. That will locate the front on the drawer itself. Then I can pull the drawer out, use the drawer pulls to attach the drawer front to the drawer, and there'll be just enough wiggle room because of the clearance in the holes that I can wiggle the front around and get it just where I want it. I'll tighten that up, make sure it's right, and then I'll go in from behind and put some wood screws in to do the final attachment of the drawer fronts. So let's walk through that process. Okay, so now to size these drawer fronts, the width is easy. Just measure the distance in between the cabinet sides. But the height, what we want to do is we want to basically come off the bottom, the width of the spacer, and bifurcate this space between these two drawers. In other words, make our drawer front come to about halfway between this space here. So roughly that is about 8 3/4, or a little shy of 8 3/4. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this drawer front to 8 3/4 dimension widthwise, and then I'll come back and cut the length. Now, what I did to trim this, these were unequal sized boards. I've got a wider board here and a thinner board here that I glued up, and I didn't want to take as much off this, so I ran this edge through the jointer, and then I took off the balance off the bottom side with the table saw and just set it in here. And that's pretty good. Probably need to trim just a little bit more off because of the spacers. But the next thing that I want to do is I want to get this to length. So I'm going to take this dimension, which I already know is 24 9/16, and I'm going to trim this down to that size minus just a little bit, hopefully the right amount for the spacers. We'll see. Might have to trim it twice. Okay, I've got this drawer fitted, this drawer face fitted. I've got shims in here, and so now it's just time to get a rough measurement and cut the next drawer face to fit. Okay, so after just a little bit of trimming on the 4 drawer fronts, everything is in place. I've got shims in here holding everything in place right now, except this top one could easily fall out. I didn't put any tape or any shims on the side. I ran out of shims, so didn't feel like cutting any more up. But this is ready to go now, so the next step is to mark out and drill holes for the drawer pulls. Okay, I've removed the drawer fronts, the 3 drawer fronts from one side of the cabinet, and now I'm ready to start marking the location for my drawer pulls. Now, this may seem a bit obsessive, but I really like to have my drawer pulls located accurately. So the first thing that I did was I took a couple of strips of plywood that are nice and straight, and I laid them out here on my work surface, and I made sure that they were square, and then I clamped them down. Then I was able to take my drawer fronts and snug them up to this square. And measure the center point of the drawers lengthwise. Now the way I did that was I got the total measurement, which is just a smidge shy of 23 inches, and half of that is 11 and a half. So I measured over 11 and a half, and I made a tick mark on the wood. Then I turned the tape measure around and measured 11 and a half and made another tick mark, and they're about 1/16 of an inch apart. I did the same thing up here. I then took my square and located it so that the square was square with the top edge here, and was splitting those 2 marks so that I know I'm in the center. And I made a pencil mark down the length of these drawer fronts, or down the width of these drawer fronts, to mark the center line. Now I have this little cheap drawer pull template, and this is from a big box store. It's probably worth about 79 cents. It probably costs $7.98, but it's pretty much worthless, except that it does have the hole locations for pretty much any drawer pull. Now these drawer pulls that I typically use in the shop are 96 millimeters between the screw holes. So I've marked the 96 millimeter locations on here, and I could just use the top edge here and put it on here, get the center lined up with the center line that's on this template, and mark my 2 hole locations. However, that would put my drawer pulls pretty high up on the drawer, which is okay, but for these drawers I kind of like to have them in the middle. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of each drawer front this way. Now this one is about 7 1/4, so I'm going to measure 3 5/8, make a little tick mark. And I'm going to measure 3 5/8 and make a little tick mark. And the center is going to be right between those. So I'm going to mark that. I'm going to do that on each of these. So now I've got the center point this way and the center point this way on these drawer fronts. Now if I turn this template upside down, I can use the lines that are scribed on here to line up my center line and my center point, and that will give me square hole locations. And then all I've got to do is mark the drilling spots for these holes. I'm going to drill these on the drill press so that I get nice straight holes through, because these holes will be guiding my handheld drill to drill the holes in the cabinet boxes, or in the drawer boxes themselves. Okay, now for the 832 cabinet pull mounting screws, I'm going to drill a pilot hole that's 11/64. That's just about a 1/64 of an inch bigger than it needs to be, but I want a little bit of play in there. So I've got the laser crosshair on my mark and just start drilling holes. Alright, I've tested the fit, and that looks pretty good. So once I get all the pencil marks off there, it'll look okay. Okay, now with the drawer fronts, the holes are pre-drilled now in the fronts for the drawer pulls. And now I've replaced the drawer fronts with the shims. I've got things taped up so they don't fall out. And now what I want to do is I want to extend this hole through into the plywood drawer box behind. So we just want to line this up as straight as we can using the exact same drill bit we used before. And I'm just marking that plywood behind there. Okay, now with the drawer fronts removed again, and my drawers are marked, and I've got a blocker piece of wood behind here, now I can go ahead and drill the holes through the rest of the way. Okay, so let's see how we did. And there we go. I think that's going to work out just fine. Now before I tighten these up, and before I actually mount the drawer fronts using some screws in the back, I want to take these drawer fronts off one more time and sand them down. I need to get these pencil marks and chalk marks and stuff off the fronts of them. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back and we'll do the final mounting. Alright, last night I sanded down the drawer fronts and got them cleaned up, got the pencil marks off and stuff. So this morning I'm attaching the drawer fronts to the drawer boxes using just the drawer pulls. What I did was I attached this drawer front with the drawer pull, snugged the two screws up but not real tight, then used my same spacers to get the front aligned properly, pulled it out and tightened those two screws up completely. Then pushed it back in, put my spacers back in to make sure everything was still lined up. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach these two fronts, get them all lined up, tightened up. Then I'll come back and put wood screws in from behind through the drawer box into the drawer front to make the attachment permanent. Alright, now all the drawer fronts are attached, lined up, ready to go. So now I can go in from the back side and attach these using some wood screws. Now to prepare for making the permanent attachment of the drawer fronts to the drawers, I've done a couple of things here. I don't know that you really need 3 drills, but it'll make it a little bit faster. The first thing that I've done is I've chucked up a 1/8 inch drill bit, which is the pilot hole size for number 8 wood screws. I've also put a stop collar on there, and I made a little positioning block with a pilot hole drilled through it. And the idea here is that I don't want the drill to go too far into the drawer front. So I've positioned this so that basically I'm going to go through the 1/2 inch plywood and about 3/16 of an inch into the drawer front, and then the screw will carry it the rest of the way. After I drill the hole, then I will countersink the hole so that the screw is flush to the surface of the drawer carcass, and then I'll screw it in. So let's see how that goes. And I'm going to attempt to do this right-handed, so bear with me. And easy as that, the drawer front is attached. So let's do one more. And there we go. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.